Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a massive challenge for any business that's trying to grow. How do you actually scale? Most leaders, their first instinct is to throw new systems and processes at the problem. But what if I told you the real secret to sustainable growth isn't in the blueprint, it's in the people building it? So why do so many companies get this wrong?
This right here. This gets to the absolute heart of the scaling problem. We're going to be looking at the journey of a real company, B&B Roustabout, who figured out that just installing new software wasn't the magic bullet. When those kinds of big, expensive initiatives fall flat, it forces you to ask a really tough question. Are we just treating the symptoms instead of the real root cause? And that leads us straight into what I call the scaling paradox. It's this weird situation where the founder, the very person who drove all the early success, can actually become the biggest bottleneck to growth. For a company like B&B, their founder, Joe, was the engine, but that strength eventually became a constraint. The systems they built to try and fix this often fail because they don't address the underlying human element. And that, my friends, is a trap that is incredibly hard to escape. This is such a great metaphor for scaling. Okay, think of your systems, your processes, your tech as the hardware. It's predictable, it's repeatable, but your people? They're the software. They're the ones who are adaptive, who understand context, and who carry the values and culture that make your company, well, your company. You absolutely need both, but one is way more complex to get right.
This is exactly why so many amazing ideas just fizzle out. Research shows that tons of promising pilot projects never actually make a large-scale impact. And the reason is almost always the same. They totally nail the technical hardware, but they completely forget about the human software that's needed to run it, adapt it, and make it work in the real world.
So let's talk more about that human software. Have you ever seen a company just keep adding more and more process, more rules, more steps, only to watch everything just grind to a halt? The reason why is almost always a failure in leadership.
McKinsey Research actually has a name for this, the Organizational Leadership Challenge. And it's a really powerful idea. It's a double gap. First, companies freely admit they just don't have the leaders they need to actually execute their strategy. And second, their attempts to create those leaders are often a massive, expensive failure.
And the numbers here are they're staggering. Depending on how you measure it, somewhere between 50 and 90% of all leadership development programs fail. Just let that sink in for a second. Billions of dollars, countless hours, all spent on things that just don't work. And that leadership gap? It just stays wide open. So what's the actual real-world cost of getting this wrong? This table, which is based on some brilliant research from Ron Westrom, shows it perfectly. Look at the pathological column. That's a power-oriented culture. Information is hoarded, messengers who bring bad news get shot, and failure, it leads to finding someone to blame. But then, look at a generative culture, the kind B&B had to build. Messengers are trained, responsibilities are shared, failure leads to learning, and new ideas actually see the light of day. The difference in performance is literally night and day.
Okay, so we've laid out the problem, right? Systems aren't enough on their own, and the way we've been trying to develop leaders is pretty much broken. So, what's the solution? Well, the good news is there's a clear, actionable playbook we can all follow.
Research from the Center for Creative Leadership boils it down to these three core principles. To really scale leadership effectively, you have to plan your strategy, provide the right content, and leverage all the talent you have available. Getting these three things right is the foundation for the entire playbook. So let's break each one down.
All right, principle one is all about the plan, the strategy. This cannot be some side project that HR runs. Leadership development has to be seen as a critical lever for hitting your business goals. For a company like B&B, this meant they stopped seeing their field managers as just operators. Instead, they saw them as strategic assets whose growth was directly tied to the company's future. It's a huge mindset shift.
Second, you have to provide access to relevant content. Look, in today's world of information overload, the last thing your team needs is more stuff to do. The key here is curation. It's about giving that field manager at B&B the right financial dashboard at the exact moment they need it to make a better call on their job site, not just pointing them to a generic library of online courses.
And third, you have to leverage your talent. This means using a smart mix of your own people and outside help. At B&B, this looked like their COO, AJ, becoming an internal champion for training others. You find your own rising stars, you train the trainers, and you turn them into ambassadors for the leadership culture you're trying to build. So we've got the principles, but how do we actually put them into practice? Let's get really concrete and look at 3 tools that any leader can start using literally today to build alignment and empower their teams. The first tool is the team charter. Now, it looks simple, but I promise you its impact is huge. It forces a team to get crystal clear on 4 things. Its core mission. Why do we even exist? Its future vision. Where are we going? The metrics. How do we know if we're winning? And the major risks. What could totally derail us? This is the bedrock of real alignment.
Next up, OKRs, objectives and key results. Writing good OKRs is really an art form. The objective, it has to be inspirational, an outcome, not just a to-do list. The key results have to be ruthlessly measurable. And this is crucial. You have to use counterweight metrics to stop unintended consequences. For example, if you push a B&B manager to finish a job faster, you better also have a metric for safety or for client satisfaction to keep things in balance.
And finally, here's a little gut check for every single manager out there. This checklist covers the absolute fundamentals. Just imagine being a leader at B&B. They had to make sure these basics were rock solid for every field manager before they could truly empower them. These aren't just nice-to-haves. They're the absolute prerequisites for effective leadership.
Which brings us right to the ultimate takeaway. After looking at the problem, the principles, and the practical tools, it all comes down to one single powerful idea.
Just let this one sink in for a minute. Systems give you the leverage to grow, sure, but they are totally useless without effective people to lead them, to adapt them, and to inspire others to use them. It's not a choice between one or the other. True sustainable scaling demands that you master both.
So as we wrap up, I'm going to leave you with this question. Forget about the abstract theory for a moment. I want you to think about your own team, your own organization. Based on everything we've just talked about, who is the one person you can start to empower to become a better leader, starting today? Because that, right there, is how real scaling actually begins.